Hi guys, thank you for coming along for this, particularly to you, Helen.
Pleasure.
Out of the box 6:30 flight this morning out of Melbourne.
Correct.
Got here before I did from the other side of Sydney, so congratulations.
Keep you on your toes, Hells. Yeah.
Lisa is our creative director and Nick runs our creative services team. So today we're actually going to talk about Perino, which is the case study that started our relationship. But I think part of the story, and there are a few little similarities to even the NAB conversation, part of the story is how the relationship has grown and helped transform Costa, which is not necessarily a brand-driven business. It's an agri-business, so tomatoes is one of the things that they produce and deliver, and avocados and
Grapes, citrus, bananas.
And Helen thankfully came along today because Alyssa, who is the client around Perino, couldn't make it. And so I go back to when this all started. I was actually in Melbourne and I was seeing another client, and Alyssa was recommended to us, and I said, like, matter of fact, I'm on my way through to the airport. She said, I live near the airport. And so we met up somewhere and I gave her a ring. I said, is this the right place? And she said, yeah, I'll just get you a coffee. Do you want a coffee? And I said, okay, that's very nice of her. And we had our meeting. It was all very positive. And so she said, where are you off to? And I said, I'm off to the airport. And she said, well, I'll give you a lift. And I was like, I owe you a coffee and a lift to the airport already, you know? But it straight away, it aligned with, I guess, when you have a relationship with a brand and with the people. And I think it goes very heavily to the people that sort of create things together. And so rewind, that was 2 years ago. I came back to Sydney. I mentioned to Nick, met this lovely lady, a great opportunity. I said, Perino tomato. She said, we have to win that. It's my favourite tomato.
I did. I screamed from my office, I think, didn't I, Gar?
Yeah.
I literally slammed my book down and was like, oh my God, I'm a Perino lover. We need to win this client.
We've got to win it.
And hey, 2 years later.
And we were SGK then, so this is our first day out. We've only been born a month or so ago, without the corporate story behind it all. Our creative SGK team has joined Marks. Marks is a global brand agency who didn't have an office here, so that's who today we are, Marks. Unsupervised, first time we're out and having a nice time out in the marketplace. So if we go back, and that's why, you know, we'll probably mention SGK. Nick said she will, so I thought I'd better mention.
It'll happen.
You all knew that. If we go back a couple of years, and I'm going to ask Helen, you know, whilst our first brief was a packaging brief, there was more to that. And if you could just set the scene around what was the real problem that Costa were trying to solve?
The Costa was trying to solve, or the Perino?
Well, Perino, yeah.
Because it began with Perino, of course, and really we were focused on Perino at that time.
Yeah.
The rest evolved. But the Perino problem was, Perino is a brand that's exclusive to Coles. We own the variety and the brand, and it is an exclusive relationship with Coles. So they are intimately connected to it. They are part of the journey in everything that we do. The sales were going backwards. They felt that the creative, the brand was immature. They felt it wasn't hitting the mark. It looked old and out of step. You know, I'd add to that, they'd also entered this category that was called snacking. But this is this is years ago, and people didn't regard tomatoes in those days as snacking. But because they were small, they put it in that snacking category. But it needed to be recreated. So that was the problem.
All going well, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So Nick, if that is the background to it, and our initial brief was around packaging, when did you kind of decide or work out that it was a much bigger job?
Yeah, from the moment that I realised it was a Coles-only brand existing in one channel, I think, and also the fact that it's produce, you know, it's tomato, it's everyday to some people, it's a staple. in that sense, and people don't necessarily think about brands, well, certainly in Australia anyway, relating in the produce category. So as soon as I read that it was in Coles, I knew that this had to be much more than just a packaging brief. This had to be an all-encompassing brand brief for Perino. We needed to have a look at how we could create a suite of assets for them that was going to give them the longevity for this refresh, so that they weren't left to be, you know, constantly recreating and repurposing. So yeah, from that moment I saw Coles only.
And you're probably, I mean, you're familiar with a punnet of tomatoes.
Yes.
Like, there's a sticker.
That big.
It's like, so you haven't got a lot of real estate to you know, actually communicate in a brand packaging environment.
Yes.
So that was very much around that sort of brand platform. I know there was a lot of research. We did a number of different sort of concepts around the positioning. What role did that sort of research help play in developing 3 different positionings, which one of them obviously we chose?
Yeah, massive role, right, Lise? And I'm sure Lise will talk to that from the creative solution, but from a strategic perspective and setting up the path with the client, it was really unique for us. We went to research with 3 different strategic positionings and creative visual worlds as well for Perino. That was quite unique in the FMCG place. You only generally do 2 to 3, well, in our time anyway, in my time in this industry. But what it allowed us to do was really pull out from consumers what they were looking for in the produce category, what they were looking for in Coles, as well as what they expected or demanded from, you know, something as simple as a Perino tomato that is actually quite amazing in taste and always delivers. And then from there, we really kind of landed on a really kind of hero, solid brand positioning that was outlaid across all of the different elements that Lise will walk us through, and the brand has still stayed true to that to this day, 2 years later. Not only that, is the research helped us uncover and work through with Coles to what further assets Perino needed to create that could support Coles with the growth of this brand. As well, because it's also in, you know, a partnership, right, Hells,
Yes,
with the retailer.
absolutely.
So it allowed us to justify the need to be building more assets, more toolkits, and, you know, more availability for this brand to shout in that crowded marketplace above and below, you know, the Coles.
And that those sort of 3 positionings, you know, the one and only is all about premium. Natural addictive is obviously about taste. Makes the moment is about occasion, and some of those all sit together at different times and different layers. But you know, we went through that process of saying, you know, if the issue was that, you know, Perino wasn't owning its premium positioning as far as Coles was concerned, it led us back into where Lisa can talk us through where we
I'd love to
land
go
on the
back a
one
slide,
and
but you
only.
can't now, so you won't. We've talked a lot about brand, and brand is not a logo, it's also not a pack. And also, Mikey spoke earlier about the need for food, and food being really connective about emotions. And the thing with Perino, when it landed on our desk, great opportunity, Nick's excited because she gets to eat tomatoes all day. The brand book for Perino initially was pink, and their brand was pink. And when you look at it on shelf, you went, this is cute. This is pink, this is fun. The problem was pink and cute and fun wasn't selling tomatoes. And so what it actually allowed us to do, and the biggest insight that I'm gonna say from all of this, was pink. Because when we look at those initial concepts that we showed you before, we went in and we all talked about it from a brand point of view, is that if you're a Cadbury's, you don't lose purple. So we assumed that everyone would resonate with pink. Our initial concepts, at least 2 of those 3, they had pink in, because we thought that was something that would be one of those definable brand assets for Perino. And actually in testing, no one recalled the pink, not one person of anyone we put out there. And we did some initial concept testing, and that's why I do think data is important, to put it in front of people and see their reactions, is that no one referenced the pink at all. Not even anyone really remembered it as Perino. And yes, it's just a tomato, but it allows us an opportunity to create a world beyond a pack on a shelf that people wanted to be part of. And the biggest thing in that data and that testing is people remembered the flavour. We did some blind testing, and everyone picked out Perino as premium in flavour. And that allowed us to build the brand positioning of, okay, this is the one and only tomato on shelf. And from that point, that one signature tagline, we were able to build all of this creative and a brand world beyond just the pack.
And so, Helen, as I know, Alyssa was running this particular project, but you were there when we first met the team.
Yes.
What was it like for Costa management, Perino management, to make the decision to move? Were there hurdles? Were there difficulties within what's not really a brand world?
I think for Perino, I mean, our business is not a brand world, but it needs to become one. But Perino was our FMCG. It was well established. It had a very different approach to Perino compared to how we looked at our other brands in the business. So I felt the process and the discovery and the support that came from what was then SGK actually put the building blocks in place to make that decision. And I don't think at that time it was a difficult decision, because I also thought it was real. As you say, we did the testing, we did the blind tasting. It was obvious it was the best tomato on show, and you can't just blindly make a statement like that. I'm very much for integrity, and I really felt that every part of that label or that brand matched it. It was the best. It's got a subtle crown on it, and it just says the one and only. It doesn't say it's the best. It just says it's the one and only. So I felt with the confidence. I mean, obviously Coles has to sign off on everything we do in that brand, and it all worked. And it also had to stretch into the other tomato varieties, of which you've seen on the screen.
And then it led into the website and all that, and the food photography and the recipe. Actually, the platform enabled it to grow like that.
Absolutely.
I guess I wasn't meaning that it was a really difficult decision, but in a world like Costa, where brand... for Perino was there, but it wasn't for the rest of it, and that kind of pushed us around into different spaces with other parts of the business, and that's what we were saying, that how a tomato transformed Costa was actually our relationship grew, but there were some difficulties that you had to overcome, which we kind of did as well.
Yes, the difficulty was I'd come into the business, and they had previously, I think the year before, so that would have been 3 years ago, the company had a bad experience with an agency. They were going to not rebrand Costa, but they needed to work out if they were a house of brands or a master brand. They didn't know where the name Costa sat as a parent or how it all worked. Anyway, this big agency came in, pulled in the team.
Wasn't us.
It was it was a Melbourne-based company, and it was a complete disaster. In fact, I'm still counselling some of these people to recover, because they just said that's a waste of money. It's rubbish. They don't get it. They're just out of step. And so there was a really bad attitude towards agencies. And also we had been a company that were farming and operational. So they really didn't think, I mean, brands were logos, something they slapped on something because they had to. There was no heart and soul, there was no feeling, there was no integrity behind it, and they made up these brands sitting on a box of old citrus or something or other. So that's really how that journey started, because then the guy that was really the acting CEO, then a new CEO came in with a new ownership, and he had a marketing bent. So he was really keen to our Costa website, for, a big business, it was awful. And it was the confidence that the company had built. And I think the other clever thing Alyssa did was, although we discussed previously with Damien, you shouldn't involve CEOs in making marketing decisions. You don't ask for their advice because they don't know. That sort of thing. But Alyssa did in the pitch of the agencies, she involved the CEO, the Chief Transformation Officer, and a few of us. So it actually got people who got a sense of who we'd chosen to work with, and I think that was what helped us make that step into then looking at our website, and then it's flown on to other things.
And I think that it goes back to Alyssa, it goes back to you guys. From the beginning of the relationship was always that way, and you invested to getting to know us. And relationships, as we mentioned before, it is equally a partnership. It comes down to, I think, the client and the brand more so to decide what you want to do, but luckily, you're good people.
But it's definitely a partner. There is no doubt. We had another experience where we were going to rebrand a brand that is called Vital. This was created in the Riverland Vital Vital Orange, was it Vital Oranges or something? Anyway, we've offended some people in the Riverland because they think that should be around forever. But, you know, because we are a country, mostly a private label, this is a very strong brand in Asia. And we know and then in Asia, from being wet market sellers, you know, they're going into this middle class market. We needed to start doing packaging, pre-packs and so forth. So again, we were talking to now Marks. But the first day the Marks team came to Melbourne to meet my category managers and chief operating people, they all walked in with their arms crossed like this, like there was attitude. You can remember the attitude. They said, what are we doing here? It's a waste of time. And one company said, I don't know what marketing is anyway, I think it's rubbish. I just have to sell. And so we had some negativity going on. But by the end of the day, happy days.
Yeah.
They learned so much from the Marks team to give them confidence to say that because they were talking their language, they weren't using the spin, they were talking the language that they understood, and then they learnt. I mean, it's been a long process, but they learnt how important it was to have trust in an agency. And that has, I mean, really before that, all we had was a poor graphic designer that she nearly jumped off a cliff in the end because she just really couldn't keep up with our demands, and the company hadn't planned for its growth. So certainly it was timely as well with Marks, and you turned out to be just the guys.
I was going to ask Nick, from your perspective, so partnership, that's what we're going to get into. What does it mean to you? What does it look like to you? And any examples of, obviously, the way you handled it?
Well, the meeting that Helen referenced, that was about 9 months into our relationship, or 9 months into the Perino journey anyway. And I really like to get under the skin of a client in a positive way, not a bad way, and figure out what makes them tick, figure out how their business operates, who they're dealing with, who are their stakeholders, who are making the decisions, who actually has a play on the brand, who has a say. And in the Costa world, what we discovered is that's actually a lot of stakeholders and people. It's not just like the beautiful Hells here sitting on stage or Alyssa, it's actually the whole business. That's how connected and tight they were as an agri-growing business built over years. And figuring that out allowed us to really kind of change our approach as an agency and the way that we went in there in terms of the way that we scoped a project, the way that we presented, even the way that we talked into the language. We don't use big fluffy words, right, Hells? That's what we talk about for the Costa client. We talk down to earth. We generally don't put a lot of words on the page. It's generally driven by creative. And that is all because we understand the teams and how to work, and it's how we help Helen and the team get the best results. So for me, that is true partnership, finding out how they tick, ins and outs, etc. And then even being able to, you know, be present and on the ground with them when the brand is launching with their Coles partners in their head office. That was just super exciting. And then having the picture that you can see up on screen of Perino sitting next to the Coles glass house. Tomatoes, I had to say that quite slowly because it's hard to say for Nick. But that brand basically came in and essentially undercut Perino, which is why Perino really needed to stand on its 2 feet. So even having the client share those photos and seeing that, you know, basically erode the market share of Coles Glasshouse tomatoes is epic. So
I did say to Nick, you know, how did the sales go? And she said in the first week they were up like 70% or something like that. And I said, that is magnificent. There is a case study. And she said, yeah, there was no one else in stock. But that's beside the point, right?
Tomato fungus, you know.
Well, our competitor, unfortunately, had, and I mean that because we need to all be in it together, they got a disease and in their glass house, and that was a huge knock for them. So while we were lucky to benefit for a while, we still had to continue to deliver in what our promise was.
Yeah, for sure. And then, Lise, from a creative point of view, I've just put up on the screen, obviously, some of the work we've done in different parts of the business. What were the habits that as we started to work with Costa, that you felt were sort of joining together towards the partnership?
Well, first of all, I'm going to thank Nick because she was going to out me as a non-tomato eater. So when this project came in, I don't actually eat tomatoes. But we have a team of creatives who love brands. And I think the biggest thing about Costa was they were so passionate and they were so proud of everything that they produced. And so somehow when that happens as a creative, it makes your job easier because you want to work with people who want to work on their brands so you can empower their brands and put them out there into the world so that consumers want to buy into them. And so yes, we have a great relationship with Costa now. You can see some of the brands we've tickled and looked into. Food is obviously a lot of photography based. There's also, as Mikey had said, sometimes illustration works for it. But we've done a lot of photography for Costa to bring the best out of their produce. And just that whole relationship, that initial brand platform for Perino, every word was debated and workshopped with the Costa team. We made sure everything felt like it was right for them. And I think that's why it's worked. And hopefully why people will continue to buy it, because we've not just done a pack design with a label on it, but we've built a world of Costa and a beautiful Perino produce that people want to buy into, experiment with, their recipes, their website design. So what started off as something really became a brand.
And so just wrapping all that up, and I was going to ask you, Helen, you know, a lot of agencies here in the room, some of the times we get transactional sort of relationships. They, in the design world, they come and they go and they send the book out and off it goes. But in this instance, you know, we've moved from beyond that, from one brief to a transformational relationship through your company. What advice do you give? How do we all continue to build transformational relationships and not transactional relationships?
Well, we've spoken a lot about that word relationship, and we've talked all day today about culture. And you know, I ask the question all the time: is culture imagined? Is it real? That cultural fit is, I think, really a very important piece of success. I mean, obviously this isn't my first rodeo, and I've worked with agencies for years with various brands, and I've seen exactly that. And I thought back when I was going to be here today on the success stories, and the successes were all based on the culture and the fit of the businesses and the people within them, and that's simply, I think, getting the sense right. I mean, we're an agri-business. You know, don't rock in there in a spivvy suit and all the language. The other interesting thing our CEO wanted, and he's a European man, he was very drawn to a Sydney agency. I think he thought you were more worldly. I think he might thought we were a little bit narrow down there.
Well.
But, you know, I said, well, how wrong he was. I mean, with the narrowness, not with the agency. But he wanted to have someone that was out of town. And the reality is Costa is known in Melbourne because of the founder was chairman of the Geelong Football Club. But really in Sydney, Costa would mean nothing unless you were into fresh produce. And you actually turn the pack over to see, packed by Costa. So, you know, and I think that was a very good move too. It's great to have a view from another city, and we are moving to being a global brand or a global business. We still haven't sorted out our brand challenge. That's in train. But certainly for me, it's culture and relationship and listening. That's the key. And really delivering, not what you want to deliver, but actually what your client wants. Well, and that's what we found.
We were talking about this the other day. We did that. We actually won the business, and after about 3 or 4 months, we said, what have we won? Nothing's happened. And because they were just so busy. So we said, come up to Sydney, just come to the office, and we'll listen for 2 or 3 hours. Tell us all your problems. Let's have a therapy session.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
And we just listened. And then we took it all away, and then 2 weeks later, we went back with a strategic approach and said, this is how we think we might better work with you and make things work together. So, you know, talk about the fit. You know, I think when we first met, we said there were 3 reasons. We know food, we love food. We know brand, and we love brand. And we know export because we're a global business and we can help you get there. Now, that just happened through the conversations that we were having back and forth before we went in. But it's nice to hear that feedback because that became the basis for what we, I guess, continue to do. And hopefully Costa brand will continue to
flourish.
Yes.
And you use the word real, we're real. It's not fabricated, it's real. It's food. Got to taste good.
Absolutely. So that's the story of where we started with Perino and continue to grow with Costa. Thank you very much, Helen, for coming on up.
It's been a pleasure.